Welcome everyone. Today we have Plenty of Games' Winner Library event, and I've got a bunch of details about how today is going to look, so I'm really excited to share it all with you. But if you're tuning in and you don't know who I am, my name is Volty. I will be your resident host for today. I'm running coverage for this event, as I did run coverage for yesterday as well. Today we have 82 players, which means 7 rounds and a cut to top 8, which is really exciting. It's going to be a lot of magic. We're going to have 10 matches on coverage during the day. I'll be running some other interviews as well, just to make sure that we've got as much fill-in for the dead air as possible. But if you've got any questions, pop them into chat. If you want to know how the event's going or if your friends are doing well, I might be able to help out. But otherwise, the judges have just made their announcement. So we're going to get right underway into the feature match for this morning, for round 1, which is Ryan Lewis-Johns on the left, who is on Walks, versus Trent, our lovely POG owner, on the right with Eldrazi. So it's a super interesting matchup. There's quite a lot at play here. From the Eldrazi side, there is the ability to present quite a lot of disruption, with things like Thought-Knots here, land destruction, the ability to interact with the board and present quite a lot of pressure. On the other side, the Walks deck has the ability to win the game out of nowhere, and that is pretty vital in terms of actually winning, because from the Walk side, the ability to interact with the board and present creatures that are meaningful in the face of 4/4s and 5/5s and 6/6s is just not a meaningful long-term game plan. So this is a pretty classic combo versus Stompy matchup, and I'm excited to see what happens here. While the players are preparing for game 1, looks like they're choosing opening hands. I'll do a bit of rundown on how today is going to work. So every round we will have a feature match. Unfortunately, we do not have the ability to have backup feature matches, so it's just going to be 1 match per round, as well as 1 match per round in top 8. So that means 10 rounds total that will be on screen, which is really cool. It's quite a lot of magic. There will be ad reads and making sure that, everyone who's sponsoring and putting effort into the stream is being shouted out. So this is a sponsored stream. On top of that, there will be interviews with various members of the community, some of the players from yesterday possible, as well as some of the players who are winning throughout the day. But let's get right into it. So Trent on the right has revealed a Devourer of Destiny. So if you don't know, Devourer of Destiny is a 7-mana Eldrazi, and it has a reveal from your opening hand effect, which states that at the beginning of your first upkeep, you look at the top 4 cards. You may choose up to 1 card to put back on top of your library, and the rest will be exiled. So it's not quite a once upon a time. It doesn't dig quite as deep, and you don't get to draw the card. However, Devour makes up for this by being a reasonable spell to cast. It's 5 colorless for a 6/6, and when you play it, the cast trigger exiles one colored permanent. So here we have an Ugin's Labyrinth exiling Devourer. Ugin's Labyrinth is a soul land that makes 2 mana, but in order to make 2 mana, you need to imprint a card that is colorless and costs 7 or more. So in this case, the Devourer has gone under the Labyrinth. This means that it will make 2 mana for as long as that card stays under Ugin's Labyrinth. The second mode on Labyrinth is that you can tap it and return the exiled card to your hand. So you can turn it off, turn it back into a waste in order to draw the card that you set aside earlier. And the follow-up play was a Clown card, which looks like it got 2 counters. On the other side, a pretty standard setup turn for the Walks deck. Fetch for a Tundra and cast a Preordain. Hoping to sculpt into a combo kill likely on turn 3 or 4. But obviously that will be pending any future interaction. Huge turnout. Congrats to Pog on a great weekend. Couldn't make it back today. Well, thanks for coming in, Trout. I did see that you followed 11 hours ago, so thanks for following. Welcome to Volty's room. Unfortunately, I didn't get pings from Stream Elements saying that people had followed, so a huge shout out to everyone in the community who tuned into yesterday's stream and followed. I promise to bring you plenty of 7-Point Highlander content in the future, including next Friday. But going back to the game, so Ugin's Labyrinth has been followed up by a City of Traders, and it looks like a Ballista for 2, or maybe a Hangerback for 2. I'm not certain which one. Trent on turn 2 has access to 4 mana, so he's really looking to accelerate into the later turns. And Ryan here is hoping to develop possibly... No, doesn't have anything. Misty Go. Okay, so didn't develop a mana dork, possibly because there's a Walking Ballista, but again, I think it might be a Hangerback Walker. He could be taking this turn off to play an Eladamri's Call, and he could be setting up either for a Walks win or for a Nadu win. So we'll see how that plays out. Off-camera, Alec has just showed up. So we do have Alec for today, which is good. He's going to be on camera doing some interviews for sure. Okay, so Trent's following up the City of Traders with an Academy. City of Traders getting blown up here. And he's going to have 4 mana. And he's putting a Lodestone Golem on the stack. So if Lodestone resolves, every non-artifact spell is going to cost 1 more. Alright, so it was a Ballista, it's animated the Clown card, it's cracking in, and the Lodestone is resolving. So every non-artifact spell will cost 1 more while the Lodestone is in play. And this is a very notable part about how Eldrazi works and how Eldrazi Stompy works, is that there are certain hate pieces that interact with the rest of the format favorably for you. So in this case, Lodestone Golem will typically add attacks to your opponent's spells. However, they're not all entirely conducive to your own game plan. And what I mean by that is that Lodestone Golem doesn't tax colored spells, it taxes non-artifact spells, which means future Eldrazi spells will also be taxed by Lodestone Golem. There are things like Thorn of Amethyst and Trinisphere, for example, which are more traditional, symmetrical hate pieces. But I think it's an interesting addition that Lodestone Golem is seeing play in this deck, because it does impact both axes of the board. So Ryan going to follow up by paying 1 for a Solitude and targeting the Lodestone Golem, exiling a Teferi Time Raveler and paying the 1. And then playing an Ajani by the looks of it. This is a really huge swing turn for Ryan here. So the Ajani presents a good, clean way to block the Clown card. Exiling the Lodestone Golem will shrink the Tolarian Academy mana. And now Trent's game plan of winning inside of combat is a bit stifled because Ajani is in play. Now, it's entirely possible that Trent will follow Ryan's turn with some interaction. If he can interact with the board, interact with the creatures, he might be able to keep getting some damage in. But he is running low on cards, he's running low on resources, his City of Traders has blown up, which is quite a big deal as well. So it looks like we've played a Khan Great Creator here, and we're going to be looking for an artifact. So I'm curious to see what he picks out of the sideboard. Khan is going to shut off artifact-activated abilities from Ryan's side. It's a very minor upside in this particular matchup, but the Nadu Walks deck does sometimes play a Shuko or a Lightning Greaves, so this may reduce the outs that Ryan's Nadu turn could have, but realistically, Nadu plus Nomads is still going to get there. So either Khan is going to get something big, and it looks like he's buying back one of the cards exiled by Devourer of Destiny. I'm not sure what it is from this angle. But cute little synergy there. Devourer of Destiny exiled some cards as Trent set up his first turn draw, and those cards were exiled face up, which meant he could get them with Khan the Great Creator. So, neat, cute little interaction there. Ajani and the cat token going to pick off the Khan, and Ryan going to develop a Nadu here. So now, if Trent has the ability to interact with creatures, he is going to be giving Ryan Nadu triggers. And on top of that, Ryan will have the ability, if he gets to untap with Nadu, to potentially go get nomads, put it into play, and win the game. So Trent is definitely against the wall here. I would say probably about 35% to win. Rewatched the final from yesterday. Commentary was spot on. It was great to have the feedback on some of the decision points. Thanks, Trout. Yeah, I mean, in terms of bringing commentary and coverage, the coverage side of things is something that I've been working on and improving my skills at. But I like to think that my commentary side of things, in terms of commentating games of Magic, is pretty spot on because I play way too much of this game and I think about it way too much. So you're welcome, everyone. So Trent developing an artifact here. I'm not certain what it is. And Ryan going to untap and put a Pyroglyph on the stack. I wouldn't be surprised if Pyroglyph targets the Ajani. I targeted the artifact. So it's some kind of artifact creature. Again, not entirely sure what it is. Might be it can't be a matter reshaper. Maybe like a scrap troller or something? No, not a scrap troller. He revealed the top card and put it in his hand. Not certain what the text line is there. Practically speaking, doesn't matter too much. Ryan has developed quite a handsome board here. Has Nadu to protect his creatures in a pinch. Trent is running pretty low on mana here. His Tolarian Academy is currently making 1. His Ugin's Labyrinth is still on, but at some point pretty soon, I would imagine he's going to try and buy the card back, so he has access to it. And he's going to develop what I think might be a Serum Powder and a tapped Traxos. Metamorph. Okay, so Metamorph is copying Nadu. That makes sense. Hiya, Pineapple. Welcome to the stream. Ryan putting a Sarah Paragon on the stack here. Gonna buy back a land and crack it, so he's gonna gain 2 life overall, and make sure he keeps hitting his land drops. I think at some point pretty soon he's gonna have a critical mass of mana to be able to do multiple things in a turn that matter. But in saying that, he still has the advantage on the board, and I would say he's still decently favored to win this game. On top of that, transport state in terms of combat and blocking is pretty minimal. Nadu having flying and the cat token representing nigh unblockable because the Ajani is in play, and this Pyroglyph is enormous. I mean, it's a 6/7 by the looks of it. I don't know how many outs Trent has here in the spot, although he did unlock quite a lot of mana that turn, and I think that's a big deal. By developing multiple artifacts last turn, his Tolarian Academy is threatening quite a lot more mana this turn. So I believe he has access to about 7. Not quite enough to pick up the Devourer and cast it, which is going to be an issue given the circumstances. And I think his draw for turn was a Grim Monolith to go with a Zurin Orb. So has the ability to develop a lot of artifacts and pick up this Devourer. But maybe opting to take a slower line. It's going to play the Monolith, going to untap the Traxos, going to crack in for 7. Just going to get chumped by the Sarah Paragon, so Ryan going to keep his life total high here, taking 3 from Trample. And I think this is one of the cool aspects of Traxos. is the fact that it has kind of unblockable. Oh, it's a Sundering Titan. Oh, Christ. Okay. And now, because Sarah Paragon chumped, Ryan may not have a land drop this turn. He lost 4 lands to Sundering Titan. And yet, I don't know if he's in that bad of a spot. It's kind of crazy to think about. I mean, he's lost a bunch of mana, but he still has the Nadu, which can fly over the creatures. He still has the Ajani, which is a... The Ajani cat token is a very good blocker for Sundering Titan here. The Pyroglyph is a 6/7, which can threaten to rumble. If it somehow gets to a 7/8, it can block the Traxos very easily. That was a huge turn for Trent in terms of slowing down the ability for Ryan to just win the game. But this game definitely isn't over. I mean, his combat is kind of awkward. His board state is kind of awkward. I mean, his academy is making a bunch of mana, which is always good. But how much does that matter here? I mean, if Ryan finds nomads and has the Nadu in play, he can just win the game. Like, it doesn't matter how many lands have been blown up. And I think it's a neat aspect of this format being so powerful that a player can lose 4 of their lands in a one-sided Armageddon and still either be even or maybe slightly ahead. Slightly ahead's definitely not true. He's either even or slightly behind. I don't think he's massively behind. I mean, Trent has access to 1,000,000 mana. There's one card that he's just drawn. His combat's really awkward. Because if he attacks with Sundering Titan, Ajani flips, and because of the Pyroglyph, uh, Ajani's cat tokens will represent damage, because it's a red permanent. I believe he has the ability to buy back the Devourer and cast it with Academy, plus the land, and I think it's a Mana Rock on the far right side. But the issue with that play is Devourer, regardless of what it hits, will trigger Nadu. And that may be scary enough for Trent to just not go for it and to say go and hope that the board state leans in his favor. I'm not 100% sure on life totals either, but I imagine Trent is quite low. He has taken multiple turns of combat, with Nadu cracking in at least twice, the Ajani and the token cracking in at least twice. He's decided on a line and he's shipping in with Traxos and Sundering Titan. So I imagine the token gets in front of Sundering Titan and you take 7, if you have the ability to take 7 here. And it's probably that, nothing else, say go. He might be thinking about making a double block to Traxos. And he'll lose, most likely, the Ajani. But if Trent kills the Pyroglyph here, the Ajani's going to flip. He'll lose the red permanent, but at least the Traxos is gone. If he kills the Pyroglyph, the Ajani will flip, which means it can threaten to make a blocker every turn for Sundering Titan. And that is meaningful. It's possible an aspect of killing the Traxos is to shrink the Academy. Okay, so picks up the Devourer in second main phase, plays an Urza's Tower, which is making full mana because of Planar Nexus, and does Devourer Nadu. So Nadu trigger going to get Ryan a land, and now he's untapping with 3 lands in play, the ability to have a 4th mana if he has a land in hand, and a flipped Ajani versus a 6/6 Devourer and a 7/10 Sundering Titan, and I guess a Clown card. So Ryan, realistically, given this board state, needs to win the game this turn. He needs to either find a way to get Nadu back into play, which I believe is going to be impossible now that it's exiled by Devourer. So it's going to be a Walks line, if anything. And he doesn't have anything, and Trent will win game 1. I think that was a really interesting game to showcase this matchup. Trent had the ability to make significantly more mana than Ryan at all points. Ryan was able to develop quite a lot of permanents. Many of them had either disruptive elements in terms of combat or generated a lot of value. And unfortunately, in that mid game, while Ryan was ahead, he had the permanents that mattered. He had a bunch of lands and a Nadu in play threatening to kill with an A+B. In that window that he had of about 2.5, 3 turns, he wasn't able to close out the game. And I think that's a really critical aspect of any combo deck versus these stompy decks, is if you can survive the early game onslaught, if you can interact with the lands, if you can interact with the board, that's a really big deal. But if you don't close things out, at some point they're going to have a critical mass of lands in play, spells in hand, and they're just going to start throwing haymakers at you. So going into game 2, Ryan will have the play this time. This gives him the ability to shorten that window because he'll have an extra land in hand or an extra land in play going into that mid game. But again, that's just how this is going to play out. There aren't any meaningful hate pieces against Eldrazi specifically. There are plenty against bots and shops, but the Eldrazi deck leaning so heavily on creatures and not quite on those artifact synergies means things like Null Rod and Energy Flux are weaker than they normally would be against something like shops. You'd still bring them in because of things like, vehicles and Lodestone Golem and equipment, but the fact that Ryan on the left won't have the ability to play significant land hate because the deck is 4 colors, won't be able to side in something like Blood Moon, means that Trent's game plan here of playing lands that make too much mana and making a bunch of mana and casting really big dumb spells, that part of the plan is going to go relatively uninterrupted. And what that basically means, and this is a high-level concept for anyone who's getting into Highlander, this is something that you can take away with you. If you aren't able to interrupt your opponent's primary game plan, your objective should be to enact your own game plan. So it's all well and good to bring in some haymakers and some hate pieces, but if you're bringing in Rest in Peace to interact with someone's combo deck that kind of works with their graveyard, but your own deck relies on your graveyard, it's just not going to cut it. So it's entirely possible that Ryan on the left brings in like 2 or 3 cards and just says ship it and hopes that he can win the game in that mid-game window, interacts a couple of times in the early game, and hopes to dodge the 7 and 8 drops by just winning the game with Nadu Nomads or Time Walk E-Witness. And Trent is going to be doing pretty much the same thing as he did game 1. He is going to have access to more disruptive elements. Some of the Khan Tudor targets will probably be sided in. Some of the more generic haymakers that are quite powerful in this matchup, but not necessarily in the metagame as a whole. Something like All Is Dust, something like Ugin, the Spirit Dragon. I could see them being brought in. But realistically, I think both players will sideboard pretty light. I think it was a maximum of 5 cards on either end. And we're just going to see a little bit more of game 1 being played out going into game 2 here. We're going to get into opening hands here. Looks like Ryan has a land and a mana dork. And I think it's a Hierarch, which is almost Rainbow, which is a pretty big deal. Trent on the other side, I saw a City of Traders, a Grim Monolith, I think it's a Berza Saga, and a Relic. Relic is one of those sideboard cards that is sometimes in the main deck of these Eldrazi decks, but it's a little bit of graveyard interaction that isn't fully committal, and it can generate its own value as needed. And that's kind of what you need for the Stompy decks. You want your early game post board to be disruptive elements rather than just random creatures like Walking Ballista and Clown Car. Relic isn't the be all and end all against walks, but it does stop one of the fast kills that the deck has access to, which is walk plus E-Witness plus Ephemerate. But it will not work against Nadu Nomads, and that's pretty critical here. Trent's turn 1 is incredible though. Mishra's Workshop, Grim Monolith, 1 mana and pull, tap the Monolith, and play Mystic Forge to look at the top card. Now, Mystic Forge is one of the best haymakers printed in the last 5 years, 10 years for these shops decks. It threatens to draw a lot of cards. It threatens to end games pretty easily. But it's being met by a Collector Oof. So there's a Collector Oof on the stack, and currently Trent is working out whether he wants to exile the top card with Mystic Forge in response to Oof. He's opting not to and to draw that card. Now, Collector Oof stops activated abilities of artifacts. It's exactly the same as Nullrod in that aspect, but it does not stop passive abilities. It doesn't stop triggered abilities. It doesn't stop the ability that Mystic Forge lets you play cards off the top. It will stop Grim Monolith, A, from tapping the mana, and B, from being able to be untapped. And it will stop Mystic Forge from ripping through the deck by paying life. But this is a big deal. Ryan has opted to keep a hand that doesn't have a second land with land, mana, or Collector Oof because he values it that highly. And now none of Trent's artifacts will have activated abilities. Whether or not that matters is entirely context dependent. Looks like he's developing a Vexing Bauble and a Relic of Progenitus. Vexing Bauble's passive ability is on, so 0 cost spells will get countered. Relic's activated abilities are off. So Relic is functionally just an artifact that does nothing until the Oof goes away. But it looks like he has a Dismember, and then is immediately tagging Collector Oof with Relic here. He's then unlocked his Mystic Forge, so he's exiled the top card. Gonna look deeper. I believe he has 1 colorless Mishra's Workshop mana left, but didn't find something to cast. Ryan draws a land here, but it is a basic forest. Definitely low on the end of lands, possibly worst possibles in terms of drawing a land off the top, but still a big deal. Is going to be able to develop a land and work towards a win, and is firing off a Once Upon a Time. So Once Upon a Time can take a creature or land if he has 1/2 of Nomads and Nadu. Going into his next turn, he might have outs to win the game, but otherwise he might just have to take a land here because his hand isn't super functional. So he's taking Volk. He may play it, and if he does play it, he has access to Bolt and Brainstorm maybe. But I think given that there's a Relic in play, a Vexing Bauble which answers Ephemerate, a Mystic Forge that has been uninterrupted, a Workshop that's been uninterrupted, I would say Trent's odds to win this game, even if Ryan made both his second and third land drop on time, I think Trent is about 70% to win this game without too much effort. The fact that he had the Dismember for Collector Oof and he got to turn his artifacts back on is a huge deal here. Now, whether or not he can make a Saga token depends on whether or not he commits City, and it looks like he is going to. Gonna value a couple of 6/6s here, which probably just win the game. And all he really has to do from here is make sure that Relic is able to be activated at some point as needed, and that he puts on some pressure while Ryan's early game is stumbling. So Ryan going to play the forest he drew last turn, has access to 4 mana, including white. So he does have the ability to play pretty much anything, but cannot play Nadu. No, he can play Nadu plus Nomads. He just can't play any double white cards like Sarah Paragon. He's going to play a forest and say go. So his hand has some kind of interaction, which is definitely important enough to not develop anything. Trent going to untap, look at the top card with Forge to decide whether he keeps it or not before drawing. He knows that he's almost certainly going to be activating Saga again. So whether or not he has the mana to use the top card, unless it's something incredibly high impact where he can eschew the Saga token. But I think it's too high value here to make the Saga token. And then he'll get a 1-drop, which could be anything, realistically. So Saga going to pop. And now he has 2 7/7s going into the rest of his first main phase. 2 7/7s at minimum, I should say, which is pretty substantial. One of the 7/7s can attack this turn. If Trent is playing something like a Lava Spur Boots to get with the Saga, both 7/7s can attack, which would be a pretty huge game. I don't know if there's any hate pieces left at 1 mana that he could get. He has the Relic in play, he has the Vexing Ball in play, maybe something like a Grafdigger's Cage or a Soul Guide Lantern, but he might simply get something that makes mana. Yeah, he's going to get Mox Opal here. Okay, so he knows that his city is probably going to blow up. The Urza Saga has already blown up. The Grim Monolith is still tapped. So he wants to have access to as much mana as possible while he has the Mystic Forge active. So that he can keep casting spells. Although, in saying that, he hasn't actually cast anything off the top yet, which is pretty surprising. So now he's in. Now this is Trent's game to lose. He has a couple of disruptive elements. It's certainly not a hard lock. It's entirely possible that Ryan can find a way through all of this that wins the game. But Trent has all of the momentum, he has all of the pressure, and realistically, he just needs to make sure that anything he does or any action he takes is profitable. Because if he can close this game out either next turn or the turn after, he's going to want to do that. So interestingly, Trent kept a mental misstep on top to draw with the Mystic Forge there. Now, notably, he cannot pay life for mental misstep because of Vexing Bauble. So not only is he valuing the misstep high enough to draw it for turn, he also went and got Mox Opal with Urza Saga to make blue mana in order to cast the mental misstep if needed. Ryan developing Ophelia end of turn, untapping and attacking and eating a Saga token. So that's 1 down. The other one is still a 6/6, threatening to get bigger. So he's going to have to do something important here. That's a good one. Getting Spellseeker. So Spellseeker in play, he can either get Walk or Ephemerate. If he goes for Ephemerate, he's pretty much all in. If he goes for Plow, he can answer the Saga token. If he goes for walk, he might have a different piece in hand, like an E-Witness. And he's gonna get Swords to Plowshares. So critically, if you go get Ephemerate with Spellseeker, it's very all in, and if your Spellseeker dies, you can lose the game. But because he has Felia in play, if he gets to untap, he can Felia the Spellseeker and target it. If it then dies, he can Ephemerate it in response if he has it in hand, and that can set up a kill. Trent gonna crack Relic end of turn. So graveyards are getting exiled. And gonna untap. Swords to Plowshares is threatening the Saga token at the moment. It's currently a 5/5. Trent going to look at the top card, see if he can find a spell to cast for free. Notably, even if Mystic Forge sees a card that you can cast, you still need to make the decision on whether you cast that or something in your hand. So, curious to see what happens here. Looks like he's found a Torpor Orb, which is a huge deal. So he's got one Workshop mana open. He's got a Torpor Orb on the stack. Torpor Orb is going to be met by Swords to Plowshares, which is going to be met by Mental Misstep, paid with the blue from Mox Opal. And he's going to crack in with the Saga token for, I think it's 5 or 6. I think it's 6. And Ryan opting not to block. So he is valuing the Spellseeker. And he might have lethal. If he has Ephemerate, if he can Felia out the Torpor Orb, which is one of his few answers to Torpor Orb, then he might be able to end the game. Doesn't look like he has a kill, so he's opting to eat the Saga token, develop a Delighted Halfling and a Morlock for 1, just as a creature. And Trent gonna opt to crack his Vexing Bauble to draw a card, so he's really looking for action here. He's got Torpor Orb as a hate piece, he's got Mystic Forge running, and he wants to find something to close the game. I mean, he's lost his board state very slowly, he's taken a bunch of chip damage from Mystic Forge, he's taken 3 from Felia twice, he's now lost both of his Saga tokens. And on top of everything, while he has a Torpor Orb in play, the Walks deck is very difficult to win the game with, because Spellseeker and Eternal Witness both have Enter the Battlefield triggers. But there are also a bunch of cards in Trent's deck that are also hit by Torpor Orb here. The Eldrazi, for the most part, have cast triggers, so they ignore it. But things like Sundering Titan don't have text with Torpor Orb in play. And Sundering Titan, we saw, was one of the easiest ways to win the game. So Trent opting for a Metamorph and copying Torpor Orb. So now he has 2 in play. Oh no, I don't think that was a map. I think that might have been an Expedition map. So he's getting Odawara in hand. He has blue from the Mox Opal. He doesn't have a whole lot of mana here. Odawara notably going to attempt to help protect him, but he looked at the top card with Forge, it wasn't relevant, and he died. And Ryan's going to take that. So the score is tied, and we are going to go into game 3. I would expect very minimal sideboarding here in terms of game 3 play draw. It's possible that Trent has some kind of top end that he might bring in now that he's on the play, that he might have left in the sideboard, something like Sundering Titan or Ugin. I would expect that Ryan's deck is not going to change. It's just not meaningful here. Yeah, and we're shuffling. Ryan's shuffled and presented. He's just saying ship it. Trent's having a quick look at his sideboard to see if he wants to reboard. So while the players are preparing for game three, just before they get started, if you're just tuning in, my name is Volty. I will be your host for today. I'm running the coverage for today's event at Plenty of Games. It is a winner library and it's a singles event. We have 82 players, which is just an incredible thing. We've got 7 rounds. We've got a top 8 that we'll cut to, so plenty of magic to come. I want to give a huge shout out to Plenty of Games for running this weekend and helping me run coverage. I think it's really, really great that we have a store in Melbourne that tries so hard to keep the Highlander community alive. And events like this are just a fantastic time. They're high EV, people have come down. Ryan on the left here on coverage is actually from Sydney, and he came down with a team of Sydney players for yesterday's event, Juzzer and Jack. And we've got people from Canberra. I don't believe we have a team from Adelaide, but I might possibly just be missing them. But unfortunately, Russell didn't show up, who is the one I was looking for. But yeah, huge shout out to Pog. It's a great store, it's a great environment, and if you're looking to pick up some cards and you're willing to get them shipped to you, or if you plan on coming down to Melbourne for a work trip and you can pick them up, check them out. We're going to go into game 3. Trent is going to have the play and is keeping, and they're both keeping 7. He's going to have a planar nexus and lead with what looks like an expedition map. Ryan going to crack a marsh flats for a savannah and play a noble hierarch. Trent on the right has an ancient tomb in hand. So at the minimum, he has 3 mana this turn. He might want to crack the map to find Academy, but he might not have the artifact count to support it. So he may simply take the time to develop a hate piece, a relic, or a vexing bulb, or a torpor. He may also develop a threat this turn instead, or he might just go Ancient Tomb, go crack map, go get tower, have access to 6 mana next turn, and do something big there. It is incredibly difficult for walks to win the game on turn 2. It requires you to play quite a lot of cards in a sequence that win the game by themselves, and it's just quite rare. So Ancient Tomb being tapped and developing. I don't know what that card is. Is it a Soul Ring? I think it's a Soul Ring. And then a Grim Monolith. So Trent is going to untap with like 9 mana. It might be. Yeah, I don't know what that artifact is on the bottom. I don't recognize that art. If anyone in chat knows, it's not a mana vault because it untapped, so it's not that. Oh, it's a talisman. Oh, okay. Okay. Hey, Kate, how's it going? Yeah, it doesn't really matter. Okay, so Talisman being a 2 mana artifact that makes 1 mana. That explains the turn cycle. Because if it was a Soul Ring, then the planar wouldn't have needed to be tapped. So that means Trent has access to 7 mana at a minimum. If he cracks the expedition map for Tower, he can go up by 1. So Tower plus Planar Nexus gives him 4. Grim Monolith gives him 3. Talisman gives him 1. So he can have 8 mana this turn if he wants, but instead opting for Urza Saga with the map. If he plays it, it suggests that his hand is probably a little bit weak, or at the very least it's lower to the ground. I see a Jeweled Amulet. I think there's a Lodestone in there, which would be pretty big. Spending 3 mana here, or at least thinking about it. If he makes a medium-sized play using the Monolith, he'll lose it for the following turn, and that's a pretty big aspect of these fast mana artifacts, like Grim Monolith and Mana Vault, is that you really have to decide what to do. He's going for Tinker on the Monolith. So the talisman at the minimum makes blue. So Trent's taken like 3 or 4 damage this turn from things. It's going to tinker the monolith into Sundering Titan and tag both of Ryan's lands. Let's see if he has anything. He's going to float white, and the Sundering Titan is going to resolve. Treasure Vault and Tinker in hand, yeah. So he's going to float a white, and then presumably play a Thelia, I'm guessing? Or an Illidanri's Call. But Ryan has lost 2 of his lands out of his 2 lands. And it is a Thelia. Okay. So Ryan gets to keep a Dork. I don't know if he has a land in hand. He hasn't had the opportunity to play a 3rd land yet, so he might have a land. It looks like there's a Vulcan there. He has Thelia, which can attack through Sundering Titan, but would trigger it again and blow up lands again. Going to exile Ephemerate to tag Sundering Titan. Trent's going to gain 7 life, and notably, no lands will blow up on its way out. And so now he has Ophelia that's attacking for 3. He probably wants to play something. It looks like he has a Nomads in hand, which might get him closer. Gonna bin a Timeless Witness, crack in, eat the Jeweled Amulet counter, get him for 3, and then develop the Nomads. So we know Ryan has a Vulcan hand. He has a land in play and a Hierarch. So if he draws Nadu, the game could be over. It's very convenient that the players' surnames matching the text. Thanks, Kate. It's good to have you here. I'm glad you're here to rip into me for the coverage. So Trent's going to untap. His Saga's going to go to 2, which means he can make tokens. He has access to a lot of mana, but he's really low on cards. He has no creatures in play. He doesn't really have any permanents in play that have text, so he's just going to say go with the intent to make a Saga token. Ryan has untapped and snap fired off Neoform on Philia to get a 3-drop. If this resolves, it's getting Nadu. If that resolves, he's getting 6 triggers. If those 6 triggers don't win the game, he can get another 6 triggers in Trent's upkeep. And Trent's in the tank here. I don't know if he has anything for this. Oh, it looks like he has an Otawara. Okay, so he's determining whether or not he has to Otawara something. If he Otawaras the Nomads, it just gets played again. So his plan is to Otawara the Nadu in response to one of the first triggers, or to hold it for the turn. Ryan's going to put a Nomad's activation on the stack and have a Nadu trigger on the stack. So at this point, Trent is working out if he should be Otawaring the Nadu. If he does, Ryan will simply take 6 Nadu triggers in response, and if enough of those are mana sources, he can redeploy the Nadu and keep going. So he's going to commit to the Otawara, and he's going to target the Nadu, which is going to give a trigger. So the Otawara trigger will resolve, the Nadu trigger from the Otawara resolve. And at this point, Ryan will presumably respond with as many Nadu triggers as possible. So there's another one, then the Hierarch gives him 1, and then 2. He can flash in the Endurance to get 2 more triggers, because he just needs to hit 2 lands here. It's just going to resolve. The last Nadu trigger will resolve from the original Nomads and put a Delta into play. Ryan has played a land for turn, does not have any mana in pull. So it looks like he's just going to say go and hold up evasive action and then play Nadu next turn and assume it wins the game. He has access to 7 cards. I am surprised he didn't go for Endurance there and get 2 more triggers, because he really only needed to hit 2 lands off 8 Nadu triggers total to redeploy Nadu, and once it gets bounced, it resets and he can go again. And that would presumably end the game. But instead, we're taking a more passive line. I mean, Ryan's got a full grip now. He had 1 card in hand before that turn. And now he has 7. And one of them is a counter spell. Not a hard counter, and Trent does have access to quite a lot of mana. But it's pretty close. So Trent gonna untap and draw. It looks like he's putting something on the stack, but the chapter ability is still somewhere. Okay, so I believe the chapter ability is currently floating, and we're in Trent's first main phase. So if he makes a Saga token, he's just dead, presumably. I can't think of anything he can get with Saga that does anything here. He can't get Torpor. Vexing Ball doesn't stop Nadu. Relic doesn't stop Nadu. How does he win this game? What can he get? There's no way he's playing like a Pirate Spellbomb. Maybe like an Aether Spellbomb, but that's pretty rancid. Draft Digger's Cage. Maybe. He might take Relic to cantrip it and hope to hit a removal spell? Maybe that's the line here? We're cracking Relic to draw a card to hope to kill Nomads with like a Dismember, but the evasive action is face up. I imagine the evasive action just gets fired off if anything is pointing anything at Ryan's permanence. I don't think Trent wins here. I think he's just dead. There's 1 mana in pool. He can activate the Talisman for 2. He can play a land for 3-ish. But his hand looks like a workshop. Yeah, and that's it. GG's. Ryan is going to take match and is going to be up 1-0 against Trent Clark. This is a really interesting match, and I think it's a very, very good start to the day. If you're watching the Twitch VOD, this is definitely one of the matchups that you would expect to see at top tables at an event. So I really wanted to put it up on coverage for round 1. Both players played really well, and I think it was a very excellent showcase of what the matchup looks like and how it plays out. So as the players pack up and check out, I'll see how the round is going, and I'll see if I can get an interview fired off. But for now, I'm going to pop off camera, and I will see you all very shortly. Hi everyone, Volty here. Today's video was brought to you with the lovely help of my patrons and donors who you can see up here on screen. If you would like to financially support the content, there's links down below, and you can make sure that if you're able to and you want to help support the channel, that you can do so. You'll also get your name visible up here on screen as well, which is very cool. If you are watching this on YouTube, please consider subscribing. It's free, it doesn't cost you anything, and it really helps out the channel a ton. And if you're watching this on Twitch, please consider clicking that follow button as well. The bell will let you be notified of when streams are going live. But otherwise, that's it from me. I'll catch you all next time.